Hello and welcome to Mean Green Game Day ahead of Week 9 of UNT football. And boy, there is a lot to discuss. The 6-game losing streak is over. And here to break it down with me is Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera. Guys, can we just take a deep breath here? We got it out of the way. UNT with their first win in conference play this season and a 30-24 overtime win at Rice. Now remember, this is after a overtime possession by Rice. They got the football first, missed the field goal. UNT gets the football, and Ayo Adeyi with the 1-yard touchdown win to secure the victory. So a lot more positives this week than negatives as we've had in most recent for a while. But let's enjoy this one for now. Let's break it down. Some of the right things this past weekend against Rice. Rachel.
I'm thrilled. I wasn't sure if this was going to happen for a while. They almost ended up giving up the game with the last-minute penalties by Tejada. But I think that it's great to see us win. We also took out the Rice quarterback, which probably was a little helpful. But, I mean, a win's a win, so I take the win while we got it.
Yep, Wiley Green was 2 for 3 and 29 yards, but Connor, Jake Constantine went 242 yards, and definitely with a more rushing side of attack that we've known the Rice Owls to be, they definitely took advantage of the poor secondary of the Mean Green.
Yeah, and the strength for UNT's defense the last few weeks, especially with our defense line rising up, has been our front seven and our ability to stop the run, but the weakness has been our pass defense over the last few weeks at least, and it has been all season. But how about this? We won on the road. Not only did we win a conference game, we won on the road. Going into the Rice game, UNT was like 1-10 in their last road game, so we got the job done, which is the most important thing, and Rachel was correct with the statement she said last week. She said, if we can score in every quarter, UNT can win this game, and that's what they did, and they won.
Mark, Seth Luttrell is now 5-1 against the Rice Owls, so we may not have the best game plan against, let's say, maybe 9 or 10 of the other teams, but Rice, he's got them in his back pocket.
Oh man, Rice hasn't really a big program to be excited about being 5-1 with, but nonetheless, we are 5-1 against the Rice Owls. Our defense had a lot to do with that. We had 4 players go over 10 tackles. Katie Davis had 18. He is a one-man wrecking crew. Dion Novo had 10 tackles, a half a sack, and a tackle for loss, and a QB hurry. We had this guy, Larry Nixon III. He has been emerging as one of the best UNT defenders that we have. He had 10 tackles. And the Murphy twins combined for a sack and a half, 7 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. Our front seven really was playing out of their mind that game. And they gave the offense a lot of a short field with Ostanani. He didn't score any touchdowns, but he also didn't have any turnovers either, which helped out a lot.
Yep, Ostanani 11 for 22, 121 passing yards. So not as dominant as you would like out of a QB, but no interceptions, so no giving up those possessions. But yeah, that front seven, man, they have been unreal. Dating back basically to the Liberty game, we've been seeing them kind of escalate in the past few weeks, but really against Liberty where you see really closing down that pocket immediately and taking care of a Rice offensive line who is not as good. But one thing this week is that the penalties, and Mark, I know you like to stress on this, the penalties, UNT won that comfortably. Yes, they had 7 penalties for 74 yards, but Rice, my goodness, 15 penalties for 114 yards. So UNT doing the right things finally on the penalty.
Yes, and I think that's a stress from Luttrell because having flags is being an undisciplined team and not being a very well coached team, getting caused penalties. So I think Seth Luttrell probably put an emphasis on playing a clean game. Obviously, if Rice did 15 penalties, they're not very disciplined, and I think that helped us out a lot, in all honesty, because if Rice would have gone for a big play, it'd be coming back.
Of course, let's not celebrate having 7 penalties is still not the best thing.
Right.
Yes.
And it's different, like if you have the occasional false start or the offsides and you're trying to play aggressive. I understand that. Every team has those kind of miscues. But I think it's in this game with Rice with 15 penalties, I think Rice beat themselves more than we made an emphasis on not having penalties and, more importantly, playing a very disciplined football, like Mark said. We still didn't play great disciplined football, but Rice just beat themselves in this game, fortunately.
I also think the 2 late-minute penalties were a big thing that you have to consider in this. They ended up, I'll say, with Ridge Tejada, he ended up moving from D-back to cornerback for this game, which he had never played before. But, I mean, that's going to change with time. So I think with those 2 late penalties, they were costly and was what ultimately cost overtime. But I really think if they clean it up this week, we could potentially see another win.
So last week, you have a game to where you take on Liberty and you lose every category. First downs. The only thing that we won was time of possession, but first downs, penalties, everything, seems like every category, we lost at. But yet we almost won the game. This week, UNT loses in every category again. I mean, you go back to time of possession, 38-39, to compare it to UNT's 21 minutes. That's near 20 minutes without having the football. 2/3 of the game goes to Rice, and just kudos to that defense. And you talk about penalties and how that might have hurt things, but UNT has had a lot of trouble in the past with having penalties on first down, which hurts them trying to get anything started, which hurt them in their third down percentages. And this week, UNT had 20 first downs compared to Rice's 25. And Mark, third down tries, UNT had 22 third downs. They converted 11 of them, so 50%. Rice, they had 34 third downs. 34 times you're setting up a third down play where they were 18 of 34. So UNT playing more disciplined football. They did have they had phenomenal field position thanks to their defense, but having those no first down penalties is really helping them improve this offense.
Oh, of course. And, Connor touched on it a little bit. A lot of those small miscues that were first down were false starts, illegal shifts, too many men on the field. And as you see, it helps out a lot not committing penalties. We got a win when we finally had less penalties than the other team. So I think that is a very good sign for the UNT football team.
And then, Connor, one thing that UNT did a lot of last week, they were 3 of 5 on fourth down, several fourth down tries. This week, UNT still had a fourth down, still went for it on fourth down. I think that streak is like up to week 9 now of having a fourth down at least try. And they were 1 for 1 on it. And then you have Rice. They had 4 fourth down tries, and they were 4 for 4. So both sides, I don't know, was their defense at all on those fourth down tries?
Well, and we're seeing this across college football today, is that teams throw these underneath routes. They try to pick up small yard situations, like on 2nd and 10. They'll try to pick up 5 yards to set up a more manageable third down. And then sometimes, like on 3rd and 7, especially if you have a young quarterback or an offense that's not typically successful in generating big plays, they'll try to set them up with a 4th and manageable. And we see Lane Kiffin with Ole Miss do that. How many times have they gone 4 on 4th down? I don't even know. I don't want to know. It's probably a silly number. But we're seeing a lot of teams do that across college football this year. It's the analytics part of the game. Coaches are starting to go from 4th down, realizing what if we punt, we only lose a net 20 yards if we punt into the end zone. They get on the 20 if we go for it on their 35-yard line. We don't really lose much field position. That's why teams and coaches are deciding to go for it now on 4th and manageable at least.
Rachel, with a 30-24 victory, you would expect a few more offensive stats than UNT put up. Austinani, like I said, only 121 yards passing. Yet he was our leading rusher. So UNT likes to run the ball with Torrey and average near 200 yards a game. Ani, 65 yards, and that was the team leader. I mean, you just don't see that. Torrey, he had 14 carries for 43 yards and a fumble. He didn't lose it, but slightly different sort of football played by the offensive side of things. How are we able to get across with this win?
Honestly, I think this win goes to Ani. He actually had a very good game, both running and passing. Our leading wide receiver was Bryson Jackson, who had 3 catches for 50 yards. He had over 40% of the passing game himself, and then he ended up having 1 carry for 11 yards. But I really think that you have to credit Ani's leadership in this game. He was able to do it without the big players. But I really think Adai and Torrey were both just having an off day, and that they knew what we were going to do. Rice knew that we're a running game as well as they are. So this game was ultimately came down to the defensive lines, and our defensive line ended up winning.
Well, they did everything that they could have, and despite the offense a little lackluster, we're going to enjoy it. A 30-24 victory. Enjoy it, guys. We got one under our belt. A few more to go as UNT takes on Southern Miss, but we'll dissect that later on in the show. But when we return, college football playoff rankings, they're out. Have you looked at them? We'll dissect it when we return. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. Just Tuesday night, 6:30. The brand new 2021 college football playoff rankings were announced. Now, a lot to discuss here. Just look. You have Georgia, Alabama, probably what you would expect. Michigan State coming out with a big win against Michigan, and a surprising number 4 in the Oregon Ducks, but plenty others. Trust me, we're going to talk about it. Here we are. So, Rachel, my goodness, looking at this brand new top 10, what's something right out of this list? Because there's plenty of some wrongs, I think we can all agree on that, but what's something right?
There are two things I think they did right. Georgia should be number 1.
Right.
They're unbeaten, and they've won convincingly every game. It's really hard to take that away from them. I also think taking the head-to-head into consideration was very important. In a lot of these games, you have the Oregon and Ohio State, and you have Oklahoma State and Baylor. And you're going to get to see today Auburn versus A&M. So the head-to-heads are clearly something they value.
Well, I think we can all agree that they got Georgia correct at
Yes.
number 1. They've been the most dominant team this year in college football. I'm going to talk about a team that maybe is not being talked about enough to a degree, at least coming into the season, but a team that's being talked too much now, and that's Wake Forest. I think they got them exactly right. I would not put Wake Forest above Oklahoma. Oklahoma's undefeated. They're at number 8, and I'll get to Oklahoma in a second, maybe later. But Wake Forest, to me, I think they're in the right position because Wake Forest, their best victory this year is against Virginia. And they're in the ACC. Now, I know what Mark may say to this, but if they had a Clemson helmet, they might be ranked a little bit higher. But then again, it's Clemson, so we already know what Clemson's made of usually. But it's Wake Forest. They haven't beat anyone good. So you give them credit. You put them in the top 10 for being undefeated. And here's something to note. An undefeated Power 5 team has never been left out of the playoff. But I think Wake Forest this season may be a different story. Wake Forest, again, they haven't beaten anyone good, and the schedule gets really difficult now. They play North Carolina today. They play Clemson next week. Then it's North Carolina State, and then it's Boston College, who got their starting quarterback back. So I don't think Wake Forest finishes undefeated, but even if they did, I don't think they make the playoff.
Mark?
I agree. I completely agree with both of them. I think Georgia should be ranked number 1. I also agree with Wake Forest. A little touch on Wake Forest. Their defense has been awful these past couple weeks. They gave up 56 points to Army, 37 to Syracuse, and 34 to Louisville. They are a very good offensive team. Their quarterback is very good. I think another team that I agree with to where the college football placed them is Oklahoma. I think being that Oklahoma has had so many close games to lackluster teams, I think is a reason for them being put at number 8. Now, they do have the bulk of their schedule that'll make or break them this season with Baylor, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State, and it just gives them a chance to get into that top 4, but I think Oklahoma at 8 is perfect for them.
And that's the same thing for multiple teams. It's not just Oklahoma where the bulk of the schedule's got. Like, this is a template, if you will, for this top 10, and it is subject to change drastically within just a couple of weeks. I mean, Ohio State, Michigan State, talking a lot about the Big 10 and Big 12. There's some big moves here. SEC, you're probably going to stay the same. Bama and Georgia is going to make their way.
If you look at the top 14 right now, number 13 Auburn, number 14 Texas A&M. Notre Dame right now, they're at number 10. Of the top 14, 13 of the 14 teams have a path to the playoff. Notre Dame is the only team without a path to the playoff because Cincinnati beat them head-to-head, and Cincinnati's ahead of them, and Notre Dame doesn't play in a conference championship. I think you will see Notre Dame ultimately move to a conference in the next several years, but for right now, that's the case for them. That's why they're not going to have any shot to make the playoff this year. They will make a New Year's Six. They should win out. But that should be noted. And Greg McElroy, the former quarterback at Alabama, now college football analyst, one of my favorite analysts, actually, he made that comment when the playoff committee showed their top 25. He's like, my gosh, there is literally a path to the playoff for 13 of the top 14 teams, which is crazy, but that's part of the chaos this year, and that's what makes college football so enjoyable this season.
Rachel, we talked about what's right and who deserves to be in that top 10, notably top 4. Who does not deserve to be there?
There's a lot of teams that don't deserve to be there. I think the first thing you have to look is Oregon. Oregon has the worst win-loss team on this schedule. They lost to Stanford, and that's just not a good game. I don't think Notre Dame should be on there. Their only notable game on there is Cincinnati, and they lost to Cincinnati at home. And I really think those undefeated teams, except for, I guess, Georgia and Michigan State, are very underrated and not seen as the teams they should be. But I also think that's just something that's going to weigh out as the teams go on. So that's what I think.
Connor, teams that do not belong.
Teams that do not belong where they are currently right now. The team that stands out to me the most is Mississippi State. I mean, they're a 3-loss team, and to me, some of this with the committee, and I'll get to the committee here in a second because there's something I want to bring up with that I am not okay with. But with Mississippi State, just because they beat Kentucky, by the way, who has Kentucky beaten that's actually good? Florida was overrated. Obviously, LSU has been a disappointment this year. So who would they play? Who had they beaten that's really good? No one. So just because Mississippi State beats Kentucky doesn't mean they should go flying up in the rankings. And I know they beat A&M too, but honestly, A&M had the fluke win against Alabama. Who else have they beaten this year? They just beaten Missouri and South Carolina, who are 2 of the worst teams in the SEC. We're going to see what A&M is made of over the next month of the season for sure, but I don't see why Mississippi State, just because they beat A&M, they have 3 losses themselves to Memphis, LSU, and then a bad loss to Alabama by 40 points. It's not like they gave Alabama a good game. Why are they ranked that high? I don't get it. To me, it's unfair, and I do want to touch on the committee. Something that I've noticed with the committee, there's 13 members. Most of the members are Power 5 members. And to me, it's unfair. You should have an equal representation from the group of 5. Let's say have 20 committee members. You have 10 from the group of 5, 10 from the Power 5, have 2 from each conference. That way you have an equal representation and you have voices from each conference having their respective opinion on who's actually legit and who's not.
I completely agree. Just a lot goes into play when it comes to alum and whatnot of these colleges, and you want to see the truth behind these helmets here and see exactly what this team is made of. Just like Wake Forest, if Clemson were to be in that same spot, same record, same teams, they'd be way up higher at the moment. And it's just, I don't know, just wish you could see them for exactly who they are. And that even goes for the top 4 of some who are overrated to potentially be in the top 4. But Mark, who got snubbed? We don't have the top 25 list here, but there were some teams who, like UTSA, undefeated, they're not even in the top 25 anymore. Who was snubbed?
I think UTSA has to be a team that you say got snubbed. They're ranked number 16 right now in the AP poll, and they were not even mentioned in the top 25. If you look at the top 25 right now, you have San Diego State, Pittsburgh, Fresno State, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, NC State. Minnesota lost to Bowling Green.
Yeah. They haven't played anyone good since Ohio State.
That's what I'm saying. And you can't rank a team like SMU, whose only loss was to a very talented Houston team, or a Houston team that just beat SMU, or a team like UTSA, whose triplets of Frank Harris, Sincere McCormick, and Zachary Franklin have been on a tear this season.
And one of 6 only undefeated teams remaining.
Yep.
Yes.
And I'm not saying they should be ranked in the top 15, but to not be ranked, I think Mark's correct. Is a little disrespectful. I think there's something interesting here. I'm going to piggyback off of what Mark said with the rankings. Notice they put in 3 Big Ten West teams, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa, and they dropped Houston and SMU from the American Athletic. There's a reason why. It's because later on, when they're splitting hairs, is the term they're going to start using, when they're splitting hairs between Ohio State and Cincinnati, they want Ohio State, who the 3 Big Ten West teams in contention are those 3 teams that are ranked. But they want Ohio State to have that ranked win and for Cincinnati to not have that ranked win. They're going to do everything in their power to make sure Ohio State or a Power 5 team with a little bit of prestige make the playoff and for Cincinnati to be left out. That's what it's all about.
I wanted to touch on Alabama real quick. You know, they put Alabama at number 2. I have a slight problem with that because they are the second best team in the nation, although they did lose to Texas A&M, and you have to knock them for that. If they were to not lose to Texas A&M, they would have still been ranked number 2. I think if you put them at number 3 or 4, it's fine. But to say that Texas A&M loss meant nothing is absolutely egregious.
I think especially this year, you can see where branding and history are definitely seen. You have Bama, who has the history. You have Ohio State, who has the history. Cincinnati doesn't really have as much history as these teams, but I really think they should be higher. But I think history and branding are something that the playoff committee isn't basing their situation off of. But it really does come into play because I think if Wake Forest had the name of Clemson rather than who they have now, they'd be at least higher than 10, 9.
In Ohio State and in the past Clemson, they're also going to bring in more of this. They're going to bring in more money for you too. That's some of it as well.
And one team that we seem to kind of hit over and expect them to be at this number 3, but that's Michigan State. Let's not take away from what they just did to Michigan. And this team has been looking legit in the past few weeks, and I think they're finally being rewarded with a number 3 spot. And do you think Michigan State, I mean, they have like we mentioned before, these teams, they're going to have a huge bulk of their schedule remaining where they have to win, and wow, is it going to be rough. But do you think the Spartans have what it takes to potentially stay where they're at?
I don't think they do. I think they were very fortunate to beat Michigan, and before Michigan, we talked about on the show, they had not beat a team with a winning record. I don't think Michigan State stays where they are, but nonetheless, Mel Tucker's done a terrific job. We've talked about that, and he's hit the transfer portal like no one did this offseason. Kenneth Walker, the running back, you know where he's from? Wake Forest, and look where Wake Forest is right now. That's saying a lot about what Dave Clawson, the head coach for Wake Forest, and what he's doing in North Carolina right now. But Michigan State has a really difficult schedule moving forward. They got a tricky game against Purdue today. I think Rachel could expand a little bit more on this. Michigan State fans rush the field. In hindsight, any team whose fans rush the field the following week has not been so good for the teams whose fans rush the field. So Michigan State's got a tricky game against Purdue. They're coming off that high. But nonetheless, Michigan State, they're from the Big Ten East. They've had success in the past. They're well respected in that conference. The Big Ten's well respected. They're going to finish high, but I don't think they're going to finish in the top 4 and stay there.
And Purdue, late in the season, they're pretty known for taking down some top competition. Ohio State, they did it to Michigan State, so we'll see.
Kings.
No matter the
upset
season.
Kings.
I'm sorry, no matter the sport, Purdue is known to pull
Yeah.
upsets.
Right.
They're a thorn in Ohio State's side, kind of.
And that makes UNT a thorn in Purdue's side dating back to March Madness. Last season, bracket breakers, you can't forget it. But that'll do it for this section as we head into commercial break. Conference championships, they're upcoming. We'll see what the cast and crew have to think on who they believe is going to make the top 2 when we return. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. With 4 weeks remaining in the college football season, you can't help but think about the conference championships. And here to break that down with me is Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera. So Rachel, we'll start with you. SEC, who are the final 2 to take on each other in the championship?
You cannot underestimate Georgia as of right now. They're undefeated. They're doing great. But I'm going to pull for Auburn. I think Auburn wins the Iron Bowl. Auburn wins today against A&M, convincingly at least. And this year the Iron Bowl is at Auburn. And the record, the craziness of that game is really going to be on display. The last few years it's been really close. Auburn is really good at home. Give me Auburn, but I still think Georgia wins this game. Georgia wins the SEC.
The last several times that the Iron Bowl has been played in the Plains against with Auburn and Alabama, 2013, the kick six. 2015, it was a really good game. 2017, Auburn pulled off the upset. 2019, Auburn pulled off the upset. So Rachel is not going out on a limb here. She's actually that could be a legit prediction. I have Alabama and Georgia in the SEC championship. If you're a fan, or if you want parity in college football this year, you want Georgia to win out, because if Alabama, or honestly whoever gets to the SEC championship from the West Division, if they were to take down Georgia, you have to think that the committee may try to get the SEC West. They're the best division in college football. The winner of the SEC championship, nonetheless, coming from the SEC West, you would have to think that the committee would put them in. But I've got Georgia winning in the SEC championship because they've been the most dominant team in college football this year.
I have Georgia and Alabama as well. You know, it's not to take away from anything from the other teams, but they're the best two coach teams with Kirby Smart at Georgia, Nick Saban, Alabama. Georgia's been the best team in the country for 10 weeks now. They've only given up 6 touchdowns all year. That's ridiculous. Like the defense is absolutely insane. Alabama's going to be Alabama. They're going to win. Especially they're going to try to avenge that loss to Texas A&M to get into the playoff because they have to win out in order to get it. So I have Georgia and Alabama, but I have Georgia winning the SEC championship.
So a quick preview here. Do you think that if Georgia and Alabama, do you have a close game? As you say, only giving up 6 touchdowns. Do you think but both defense are pretty solid in Alabama and Georgia. Do you think it's a close game, it's a nail-biter in the end, or do you think it's a high-scoring affair?
I think it is going to be close in the first 3 quarters because Alabama has yet to prove me wrong when it comes to SEC championships and beating Georgia. They did it in the national championship when we all thought Georgia was going to win.
Right.
So I think it'll be a close game, but ultimately I think this Georgia team is too good for that.
Tua Tagovailoa. You got to love it. All right, here we go. On to the Big 12 now. Obviously, it was Texas, OU in the very beginning. Texas, they're lost. OU, they're still up there. Baylor on the rise past couple years. So we'll see what you guys think about the Big 12. Rachel, what you got?
I think it's going to be bedlam for this conference championship. Oklahoma is currently the only 9-0 team out there, and Oklahoma State, if they end up winning out as well, or if they end up winning and losing to Oklahoma, it's going to be Oklahoma State because Baylor wins the head-to-head in that game. So I think Oklahoma ultimately wins this game. They're the champions. That's not going to change, I think.
Iowa State's lost to West Virginia last week and kind of separated the Big 12 from like the top tier to the middle tier to the bottom tier. Now the top tier is definitely Oklahoma State, and Baylor. It's going to be between those 3 teams. Something to keep in mind, Oklahoma State beat Baylor earlier this season at home head-to-head, so they got the head-to-head. But Oklahoma State's schedule moving forward is a lot more difficult than Baylor's.
First and goal.
Oklahoma State has a very interesting game,
A lot of
sneaky
room.
game against West Virginia on the road today, and I would not be surprised to see West Virginia win that game, and if they do, that creates even more chaos in the Big 12. Ultimately, I do see Oklahoma State and Oklahoma meeting in the Big 12 championship with Oklahoma winning, but don't be surprised if Oklahoma loses a game before the Big 12 championship.
I have Oklahoma and Baylor, actually. I think Baylor's defense has been very good this season. I think Baylor in general has been a very talented team this season. I actually think that they're going to beat Oklahoma when it comes to this next week coming up, but I think Oklahoma will avenge its loss in the Big 12 championship.
That should be a good one. The Bears hosting OU here in the next couple of weeks, and I wouldn't mind that pick. Get to see them twice. I think it'll be 2 high scoring.
Bad news Bears.
Exactly. Back-to-back years. So Big 10 now. Let's go ahead and switch up to there. So Ohio State, you have a lot of pride going into Michigan State as of late. Those two are going to take each other on in 3 weeks. There's a lot to discuss here with the Big 10. Rachel, who you got?
I have Minnesota and I have Michigan State.
Wow.
Michigan State has been very good as of recently. They just had the big win against Michigan that they probably shouldn't have won. And they're going to go play Ohio State later in the year. Ohio State's proven that they aren't unbeatable at home. They've lost already this year. They lost in 2017 to OU, and then they lost in 2014 to Virginia. I think Michigan is going to take this. I think Mel Tucker is a very good coach, and Michigan State will ultimately end up winning.
There's so much to be played and said over the next month of the season. So many things can happen just in the Big Ten East alone. So you talked about Michigan State, Ohio State. How about in the Big Ten overall, I should say? You got Michigan State against Purdue today. We have, again, Michigan State, Ohio State. You still have Michigan and Penn State. You still have Michigan State and Penn State. We still have Michigan, Ohio State. There is a lot to determine the college football landscape over who makes the playoff. It's the only thing that could be said and done, or the only team that's a lock as of right now, I'd say, is Georgia. Everything else is fluid. There's so much to be played over the next month of the season. But from the Big Ten, I would say Ohio State, because it's kind of like Oklahoma in the Big 12. Until you beat them, or more importantly, until you dethrone them, I'm not going to pick someone to dethrone them. But I think Ohio State gets there from the East Division, and I think Wisconsin, with the way they've been playing lately, I think they get there from the West.
Okay.
I think Ohio State wins it as well. I think Ohio State has been playing very good football ever since that loss to Oregon. They've been on a tear. They beat Penn State just now. But I think Minnesota actually rises up and challenges them in the Big 12 championship. They've been playing very good lately. They started off the season rough with the loss to Bowling Green. It was 14-10. Their offense looked atrocious. They already played Ohio State, and they played them tough week 1, 45-31. In these last couple of games, they beat Northwestern 41-14. 34-16 against Maryland, and 30-23 against Nebraska. Minnesota is a good team, but I think Ohio State is just a lot more better than them.
And can you imagine the chaos in college football if Oregon lost another game, and if the Big Ten West won the Big Ten championship? Can you imagine the chaos that would create? We still have so much. There's still so much to be played this year in college football. No team is a lock right now to make the playoff except for maybe Georgia.
And I think that's a good thing. You want to see those puzzle pieces kind of move around. And yeah, you may have one lock, but I think it's going to be fun to see these things kind of move around. But let's go ahead and switch to the next topic very briefly. The ACC. No Clemson this year. What a shock. Rachel, who's your new top 2?
Wake Forest and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's definitely had a good year. So has Wake Forest. I think Pittsburgh is a little more balanced. So I'm going to say Pittsburgh ultimately wins this game.
Okay.
Pittsburgh and Wake, I think they meet up in the ACC championship. I think Pittsburgh wins. I talked about earlier how Wake Forest's schedule is really difficult in this month. The North Carolina game that they played today, that's actually not considered a conference game. It's not considered an ACC game. I don't know the exact explanation. All I can tell you is go look it up and you'll see what I'm saying. It's actually considered a non-conference game. So that game would not affect Wake's standings in the Atlantic Division of the ACC. But again, they still have difficult games against Clemson, North Carolina State, and Boston College. Again, BC's quarterback is back now. He should be getting healthier by that time. They play the last game of the season, and 2 of those games, BC and Clemson, are on the road. And Clemson, of course, they've got a multiple-game winning streak in Tiger Stadium right now.
I have Wake Forest and Pitt as well. Wake Forest has been on a tear this season. Their defense might not be good, but their offense, and more particularly their quarterback, who I've touched on, Sam Hartman, he has almost 2,500 yards passing, 22 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, and he's rushed for 6 touchdowns, which is second to the team. So Wake Forest is a very good offensive team, and the ACC isn't that good this year, as Connor and Rachel said. So I think Wake Forest wins the ACC championship.
And now let's switch to Conference USA. Mark, we want to stay with you because you had UTSA in the beginning. You were riding their coattails and think that they'll be Conference USA champs. Do you still think that is today?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I think UTSA plays Marshall in the Conference USA championship, and I think they beat them handily. UTSA has shown this season that they are the most talented and best team in Conference USA.
I think it's UTSA, Western Kentucky. Those are my 2 teams from the preseason, and I still believe it. But I think Western Kentucky gets them the second time they face. It's hard to beat a good team twice in the same season. I think Western Kentucky definitely could have won the first time they faced, and I think they'll get them the second time.
So UTSA gives them their first loss.
I think Western Kentucky hands UTSA their first loss, yes.
Yeah, I agree with Mark. I think it's going to be Marshall, and I think it's going to be UTSA. UTSA is going to ultimately win, but it's going to be more of a shootout and not as close as it can be.
Well, as we know far too well, just a few weeks ago you did your midway through the season predictions, completely lopsided now, and they'll probably be the same as we look ahead to the conference championships just because of how bulky this next 4 weeks can be. So we'll see how things shift around in the end. But when we return, we're going to discuss UNT and their next foe, and that is in the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. Stick around. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. UNT battles Southern Miss this week. Now, this is fresh off of a 30-24 overtime victory over Rice. Now, UNT doesn't play too many overtime games. In fact, the last time was 2016, where they had 2 overtime games, and most notably they beat Rice in a double overtime game. So these two are pretty used to playing each other beyond the 4 quarters. Now, Southern Miss, they have a brand new head coach. If you don't know him, his name is Will Hall. Now, he has been bouncing around for the last decade, team to team. As of late, it's been Memphis, out to Tulane last year, and now with Southern Miss. Now, this is a guy who's 57 wins and 27 losses in his coaching career. So 30 games above 500. This guy knows how to win. But this year, with Southern Miss, he is 1-7 leading the charge. So we'll see how the Mean Green are able to fare at Southern Miss today, fresh off of that overtime win. I think UNT, I think they have all the confidence in the world heading into this game, taking on a one-loss team. And UNT, they know what it's like to be a one-loss team. They were 1-6 just a week ago. And I think UNT has an opportunity here with the Golden Eagles struggling on offense and certainly on the defensive side of things. But what do y'all think? What do you expect to come out of today's matchup against the Golden Eagles?
I expect it to be a little close in the beginning because I think mentally both these teams are thinking, for at least Southern Miss, are thinking this is one game we can win this year. For UNT, this is our second game to win in conference, our 3rd game to win overall. For both these teams, it's mental first. You have to beat your opponent mentally, and you cannot just overestimate or underestimate them. It's something that a lot of teams are a lot to do. That's why we mentioned earlier Michigan State possibly losing to Purdue. The game is first mental rather than physical.
And the mentality, I think UNT itself, like the university, they're already displaying some signs that you don't want to see if you're one of us, and that is all over campus, there is nothing but homecoming banners, homecoming festivities and balloons and this and that, all the decorations. You still have a week to go. You still have to take out Southern Miss. And I think that if UNT was here walking the halls, it's like, we still have another game this week. Yeah, you have a big game next week for homecoming against UTEP, but don't discourage, and don't take this game out of the schedule and just play right over, because you still have to prove yourselves, especially on offense where you were way lax. Connor, do you think the UNT offense has a chance to redeem themselves from last week and completely flip the script and have a pretty blowout game today?
I don't know if it's going to be a blowout. I don't know if UNT is built to blow any team out, but
Not yet.
not yet. But I think, at least from the offense perspective, like you were saying, I think this is a game that, with Southern Miss's inability to move the football this season, I think for UNT it's going to be like last week. Just don't turn the ball over. Just don't beat yourself. I'm not going to say we're going to put up 40 points in this game. I don't think we will. But I think the defense can have a good day, and I think it's important for the offense to not ruin the day for the team. I think it's important for them, again, to not beat themselves and to just take care of the football and don't have the miscues, don't have the penalties, stay on track. Get into 3rd and manageables, because there's probably going to be a lot of 3rd downs in this game with the way Southern Miss plays aggressively on defensively, the way that the Southern Miss offense can't move the football. Mm-hmm. So again, don't have the mistakes, don't beat yourself, and you should come out on top.
Mark, I mean, we have the defense, man. They've been blowing through the past few weeks, and against a pretty good offensive line in Liberty. And then obviously last week we can see what they do against a pretty bad offensive line in the Rice Owls. Now you take on another poor Southern Miss offensive line. How do you think the defensive line's going to do?
You put it very lightly, being poor, because this O-line is terrible. They've given up 38 sacks on the season. Rice only gave up like 20. And our defense has been playing very well, especially our front 7 with Nixon, the Murphy twins, Deion Noville, Katie Davis, Tyreek Davis. Our front 7 is our best unit of the team, and given that Southern Miss's offense isn't their best unit, we should be able to dominate on that side of the ball.
Yeah, so Southern Miss has given up 38 sacks, like Mark said. That's second to last in the country. Only Akron ranks worst with giving up 50 sacks. So obviously Akron's by far the most struggling offensive line, but there's a reason why Southern Miss has their 3rd-string quarterback in this season. It's because the other 2 quarterbacks got banged up. And it's hard to move the football when your offensive line can't generate any kind of a push, whether it's running or pass blocking. And like Mark said, with our strength being our front seven, specifically our defensive line and linebacker play on the outside, rushing the passer, this is shaping up to be an ugly game for the Southern Miss offensive line.
And watch out, because UNT, they took out Malik Willis in Liberty's game. Now, obviously, he ended up coming back, but boy, if you give UNT a chance here to paint a target on your quarterback's back, watch, especially if they're in their third-string quarterback, Rachel.
My biggest worry in this game is, if you remember last year, they played in Denton. There's this lovely running back named Frank Gore Jr. He put up 134 yards rushing on them and 1 touchdown. But he's someone you don't want to underestimate. That's something we did last year, and it clearly came back to bite us. We ended up losing that game. I think that the biggest thing in this game is the passing. They actually have a decent passing game. Our secondary has been kind of questionable this year, with giving up at least 100 each game, if not more. So I think it's our secondary. I mean, they're kind of young. You're going to see possibly Rich Texada getting his next start that he hasn't had very many. It's his second start, so we'll see how that goes.
And with the inability for Southern Miss to get a push up front, they've had to rely on big plays. And a guy to watch out for is their receiver, Jason Brownlee. He's averaging about 14 yards per catch. He's had about half the touchdown receptions from the third-string quarterback for Southern Miss. He is definitely the guy that you want to make sure he doesn't beat you. You take him out and you let the other guys beat you, because you know they're not going to be able to run the football consistently. But it's not Frank Gore Jr., it's their offensive line's inability. It's not his inability. He's still a very good player. So like Rachel said, you don't want to underestimate a guy like that. So you have to make Southern Miss beat you with their non-star players. So you take Brownlee out of the game, you double team him. Obviously you want to play man coverage with him at all times. You want to have a guy wherever he goes, because they're going to motion him. They're going to try to get him with a mismatch, have a safety over the top to make sure he doesn't beat you going along, and you should be good defensively.
Mark?
I think we can collectively agree that another key thing is Austinani playing mistake-free football. When Austinani plays mistake-free football, we play very good. And I think a guy to watch out for the Southern Miss defense is a guy named Malik Shorts. He is their defensive back, and he is their leading tackler as a defensive back with 63 tackles on the season. He has 2 interceptions. The guy's a baller, and he's very quick to jump on a ball and try to intercept it. So I think if Austinani plays mistake-free football, we should be fine.
We'd like to hope that continues and that streak continues, because he seemed like he's been playing cleaner football as of late, which hence you see more of the success brought on by the Mean Green offense. Now, with the defensive line being phenomenal against the run this season, which we could not compare that to last season where the floodgates was just open every game. You want to pass it, run it. You want to crawl your way to the end zone, we'll let you have it.
The bowl game against Appalachian State was the ugliest defensive performance I've ever seen.
And so that was the same point as Rachel brought up earlier, where Frank Gore just went on a tear in Denton last year. But we're not expecting to see that this year, even though it's at Southern Miss. So as long as the D-line does what they should against a very bad offensive line, and that's defend the run, do you think that we'll see something different this week out of UNT's rushing? Because last week, Austinani led the team with 65 yards on 6 carries. Torrey, it's not like he didn't have any carries. He had 14 carries, but only 43 yards. So do you think that UNT or does Southern Miss really try to home in down on that box on the D-line and try to shut down Torrey immediately?
I think the biggest thing to look for in this game is, because Southern Miss's inability to move the football, with how the advantage for UNT is heavy on the defensive line versus Southern Miss's offensive line. Southern Miss may have a lot of 3-and-outs in this game or not be on the field for long extended drives, which means the Southern Miss defense is going to be on the field more. So I think over the course of the game, the UNT offense could possibly wear down Southern Miss's defense.
I think every team knows that we are a run-first team, so every team stacks the box against us. And UNT offense expects that. So I don't think it matters if they game plan for it, because UNT knows what they're game planning for. So I think our rushing will be perfectly fine. DeAndre Torrey did get a little banged up last game, so I don't know if he'll be 100% to go. But Io Adehi, he has been very good for us. He scored 2 touchdowns for us last week, and he's been on a tear this couple of seasons. And Austinani, they've used him a lot in the run game as well.
I would say a worry with that is that he's a little older, so that might end up being the best scenario for UNT with our offense. But I think that it was just an off week last week, and that they're just going to get better from here.
Well, Rachel, keys to the game this week, because last week you predicted it. As long as UNT scores in all 4 quarters, you get the win. You scored in 4 quarters. You got the win. You needed overtime, but you got the win. So do you have keys to the game for this week?
I have the same key to the game. I mean, that is one key I've got. I think another key for this game is to mentally get it together and have things prepared. And I think your younger players that were starting in new positions last week are practicing this week was crucial to get them the extra time and prepare them just for this game, because they know that the rushing for USM isn't very good. So this is the week that they're going to pass. So
If it's not broke, don't fix it.
They will bend, but hopefully do not break this week. But Rachel, we're going to hold on to what you have, alrighty? So let's see what the Mean Green can prove this week as they still remain bowl eligible. And we'll have some predictions when we return, along with the UNT game and some big ones this week. Connor, you mentioned last week about the number 16 curse. Well, Auburn, they got past that. So can they get it again today against A&M? We'll talk about it when we return. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. Got some big games today here in Week 9, and we'll discuss them as we move along. I have Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Pereira to break it down. Here we go. Auburn, A&M. You had Auburn ranked at 18 last week. They got the big win. Now they take on Texas A&M. A&M looked to prove themselves this week. Now you have the brand new rankings. Auburn sits at 13, A&M 14. Looking for something to prove here. Rachel, who you got?
I got Auburn. I think it's going to be a very close game, with location being at A&M and A&M ultimately beating Alabama earlier this season. I think Bo Nix has improved, and I think their defense is just better.
I think Bo Nix is going to be the difference in this game. When I look at the two quarterbacks with Zach Calzada for A&M and Bo Nix for Auburn, Bo Nix, he's been a magician the last month of the season. He's playing well right now. He's not turning the ball over. He's had a good touchdown to interception ratio the last month of the season. I think Auburn finds a way to get a win. And I talked about the Big Ten East, how it's interesting. The SEC West is also very interesting moving forward. But I think Auburn gets a really close win today in College Station. That's going to be a great game.
I have Texas A&M winning. Zach, you mentioned, I think, last show that Kyle Field is one of the toughest places to play in.
Second best. Yep.
In all of college football, and we saw that earlier this week with Alabama. I think Alabama's better than Auburn, so I have Texas A&M.
And that's exactly why I chose the Aggies as well. So we'll see. But yeah, as Connor mentioned, should be a great game there at Kyle Field. Next up, oh boy, Texas. Wow. I want to root for them so bad. You have the young team, and you see the potential in them. The first half of Texas OU, the first half of the season, and yet on one of the worst losing streaks they've had in a long time. But you got to look at it. They're young, and that's a bad thing. They're young. It's a good thing. You see the potential that they have. So we'll see how Texas goes for next season. But for now, I'm going to do something I haven't done in a while, and that is Iowa State is going to win today against the Longhorns. Rachel, who you got?
I got Iowa State. They're a super senior team, like Connor mentioned earlier. This is the year of the super senior. I'm going to go with the super senior team with Iowa State.
Hey, so I'm going to combine what y'all just said. So, yes, Iowa State's a super senior team. I'm going to go with the Cyclones. They usually bounce back after losses very well under Matt Campbell. But something else to look for. Texas, like you said, Zach, they're a young team. Next year, when all these super senior teams are having to replace everyone and everyone else is having to replace a chunk of their production from the extra year of eligibility, young teams who have potential, who are playing good at times this year, and you can obviously see that they have the potential to be really good, and Texas, given their talent, I think Texas could be a team to watch for next year.
I have the Cyclones as well. I have Iowa State, but I am worried because all of us pick the same team, and every time we do it, we get it wrong. So I pick Iowa State. I pray they win.
And I said this a month ago. Whatever I predict Texas to do, they're going to do the opposite. So Longhorn fans, this might be a good sign for you.
We can only hope. But next game on our list is Ole Miss and Liberty. Liberty just took on UNT just 2 weeks ago. UNT gave them a pretty good shot. Ole Miss, they're next on the schedule. Personally, this one should not be easy. It shouldn't be hard. That's what I should say. Ole Miss should take this one pretty easily.
I'm a little worried about Ole Miss. I still think they're going to win this game. I think they have a banged-up quarterback with Matt Corral, but I think this is the week they come back.
Give me Liberty or give me Ole Miss, and I'll take Ole Miss. This game could feature a lot of points. You got two really good quarterbacks in Malik Willis for Liberty and Matt Corral for Ole Miss. Ole Miss's offense is a little bit banged up, but they are going to be a little bit they're getting some guys back today against Liberty, but I'm worried if Ole Miss is looking ahead next week to Texas A&M, but it should be a really good game. But I think Ole Miss finds a way to win, and I think they win comfortably.
Okay.
Give me the more talented team. Give me Ole Miss with a better quarterback as well, I believe. Matt Corral is a Heisman candidate, and that is truly to be something said. So I think Ole Miss will win.
It should be a good game, though. But what do you expect out of Liberty? Do you expect like the same performance as we saw at UNT? Probably not.
No. Liberty's had a problem the last few weeks playing down to their competition level, but now they're going to be playing, I guess, up to their competition level. But I do think Ole Miss finds a way to win.
We'll see how both of the teams compare. Louisiana Tech and UAB, the Blazers. That's who I'll be taking today. I think UAB should take this one. I think it'll be kind of a close game in the first half. La Tech, they tend to have a lot of close games, but UAB in the end.
UAB, La Tech's been really inconsistent this year and giving up games all year. I got to give it to the team who's at least better, and I think that's UAB.
Talk about a team who plays to their competition level. Louisiana Tech does. I think UAB wins at home. The loss to Rice a couple of weeks ago was a fluke loss. I think UAB is still a legit team. I think they win at home.
Louisiana Tech is very funny because they compete very well against other teams. They lost against SMU on a Hail Mary that they should have won. But they're like the Nebraska of the group of five. They play everyone tough, but they lose.
They barely lost at North Carolina State. They should have beat Mississippi State on the road.
Exactly. Yeah. But because of that, give me UAB.
So it's an entertaining game just to watch, but nothing to break your bracket over, right? All right. Next team on our list looks like it's going to be Marshall and FAU. Personally, I'm going to go the Marshall route, and you mentioned UTSA and Marshall in the Conference USA final. I'm going to go Marshall this week.
I'm going to go Marshall as well. I think Grant Wells is a better quarterback.
Florida Atlantic, they've got a 12-game winning streak at home. I think they find a way to win a close one at home. Marshall's actually a 1.5 favorite on the road, so that's technically, if you were to throw out home field advantage for FAU, Marshall would be about a 4.5, 5-point favorite. But I think Florida Atlantic finds a way to pull off a minor upset in this game at home.
Wow, okay.
Marshall's run offense is phenomenal, and FAU's run defense is a little shaky at times, so give me Marshall.
And finally, on our list, UNT and Southern Miss. We talked about this all show of what they were able to put on last week against Rice and what they could do this week against Southern Miss. But all in all, it's going to come down to this. So last week, if you don't remember, Rice all the way, and I went the UNT route. That worked. Well, we have that again. We shall see. Personally, UNT, they're going to continue their win streak, as I mentioned. They're going to have it for 3 more weeks, but we'll see if they can pull it off today. As far as close or not, as we were talking earlier, as much as I'd love for UNT to finally get a blowout win like they had in Northwestern State, if they can stop Southern Miss and have the time of possession again, you can't give Southern Miss 40 points or 40 minutes like you did Rice. You squeaked by. You just look at statistically on paper and you're like, how did UNT pull away with this one? In every statistical regard, you lose that. But if UNT can turn that around this week, UNT will win comfortably. You can make up of what that score will be, but comfortably UNT should win heading into homecoming. Rachel, who you got?
I have UNT. I'm going to listen to Zach this week. They seem like they've gotten things together so far. They need to score in every quarter, like I said last week, and like I said earlier. But I think UNT is going to win this game. And I'm a little worried about mentally, but other than that, I think it's UNT.
So even with like a banged up DeAndre Torrey, do you think he kind of comes into play this week?
I think he's still going to be. I think he'll be the Torrey we're used to. So I just think last week was an off week or fluke for our running game.
Okay.
I cannot remember the last time I picked UNT to win a road game, but here we go. Go Mean Green. I think UNT finds a way to win.
Back-to-back weeks? What?
Yeah, I know, right? Hey, it's 2021. It's the year of the chaos. Let it happen, man.
I
Let
can't
it be.
remember. I picked last time UNT to be the actual FBS school. But give me UNT.
All right.
I think the Mean Green will win today. If they lower Frank Gores Jr.'s ability to carry the ball and be able to stuff him like we talked about in the last segment, I think UNT should win comfortably. I believe it'll be around like 30 to 14 range. I think UNT will take care of business.
So you mentioned the Iowa State round, okay? So we all chose Iowa State.
Uh-oh.
And Connor, he predicted that well. It seems to be like when we choose one team, the other will win. So you think the same way about Texas this week, but did we just contradict ourselves about UNT? Because I went the one route last week and UNT pulls it off. Now we all say, oh yeah, jump back onto the UNT train after one win. Did we just contradict ourselves? What do you like UNT? Should they pull it off?
I think Texas is a more inconsistent team than Southern Miss.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
So Texas is more talented enough, and Texas is talented enough to actually end up beating Iowa State. I think talent-wise, we are so much more talented than Southern Miss.
And there's just a huge difference at the line of scrimmage in this game. I think UNT,
Right.
even if they have 8, 9 penalties, I hope they don't, but just knowing what we have done in the past, even if we have several penalties in this game, maybe a couple turnovers, I still think UNT should win. So
Just about 6 or 7 sacks a game. I mean, do you expect more than that potentially today with that bad offensive
well,
line?
that's such a high number. I don't know, because maybe Southern Miss will try to formulate a game plan where they're getting rid of the ball quick. They're running pick plays to try to take away that from UNT. But UNT's defensive line is certainly going to get a push in this game.
Well, we like to hope so, and then keep your predictions to the game. Score every quarter, win your quarter, win the game ahead of you. So we'll see if the Mean Green can pull off the upset, if you will, against Southern Miss and continue this slight win streak that they're on. Let's enjoy it while it lasts. But that'll do it for Mean Green Game Day. Like I said, you can follow us on all of our social media handles from YouTube to Twitter and others. But that'll do it for us. For Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera, I'm Zach Fox. Thank you for your time this time. Until next time, God bless.